Bernie Bro here. I want to talk about Antifa and this whole notion of calling it potentially a terrorist organization. I have my thoughts on this matter. Um, I do have a perspective on Antifa, and it's pretty mixed. Um, as a lifelong leftist, and part of being a leftist means absolutely totally opposed to racism, bigotry, and hate. If there's one thing I hate is hatred, because hatred is such a negative emotion. Um, so that's part of who I am as a leftist. I'm not virtue signaling. I just think if you're a decent human being, you don't hate somebody on the basis of their color. You do not hate somebody on the basis of their religion, nor their ethnicity, nor the gender, nor sexual orientation. And I would venture to say, even political ideology, even if it's an ideology you do not agree with. Now, I'm a human being at the end of the day, and I am with fault. I have faults just like we all have faults. And there are times I find myself despising individuals and even despising movements that goes against what I believe in, and I could be pretty vicious and at times. It's a fault of mine as a human being, and that's something I need to work on. Um, and as I said, we all have our faults, but when it comes to the movement of Antifa, uh, there are people who are wanting to call for designating Antifa a domestic terrorist organization. I'm not fully on board with every aspect of Antifa, but I'd be damned if they should be considered a terrorist organization. Um, the the uh, the logo that you see with some of these activists, the three arrows listed, um, there's a history to that, and the history of it is very positive, and it comes close to home for me because I when I was in my 20s, I belonged to the Young People's Socialist League. Just in case you don't know what YPSL is, Young People's Socialist League. It was for the many years considered the youth section of the old Socialist Party of America. Um, and go into nuance for a brief moment. The Young People Socialist League played a hand in the creation of SDS in the early 1960s, although they did exist separately on their own and continue to do so as the youth section for the Socialist Party of America. By 1972, when the Socialist Party of America split for quite a few years under the new organization, Social Democrats USA, commonly known as SEDUSA, which was the most conservative out of the three-way split. The three-way split included the Social Democrats USA, Democratic Socialists of America, which will eventually be called, and what is now called the Socialist Party USA today. The Young People Socialist League stuck in, what I can remember, they stuck with SEDUSA, Social Democrats USA, because there was no youth section as far as people were concerned. The way I understanding it, and anybody hearing this, and if I'm wrong, please correct me on this. By 1989, the Socialist Party USA pretty much reclaimed YPSL for themselves, but it was not directly a youth section officially with the SPUSA, but it was an independent youth organization affiliated with the SPUSA. When I was in my 20s, I joined YPSL for a while, and I was briefly on the National Executive Committee of the organization. But but anyway, that was prior to turning 31, which was the age cutoff was 31 at the time. But why am I mentioning Yipsel? Because Yipsel had the three arrows slanted down, as you can see in the thumbnail on the video here. Where did that symbol come from? It was part of a campaign poster in 1932 in Germany for the Social Democratic Party, and it was pretty much telling you what they opposed, which is why I consider myself part of the, as far as socialism is concerned, I explicitly identify as a social democrat. And the 1932 campaign poster had a lightning bolt striking against the hammer and sickle, a lightning bolt striking against a crown representing a conservative, a monarchy or reactionary conservatism, and a lightning bolt striking against National Socialism or Nazism, or if you want to be broad, fascism. Um, and that's what the Social Democrats in Germany made it clear that they opposed to on principle. That's pretty much what I oppose. I mean, I oppose all forms of Marxist-Leninist thought and movements called communism. It just doesn't appeal to me, even though I've been called out a million times by ignorant people. Reactionary conservatism, I just, I just do not believe in an authoritarian, even if it's race neutral. I still would oppose authoritarian right wing ideology. And of course, I oppose Nazism or fascism, an ideology based on racial hatred. Pretty much is as low as one can get, and that's pretty much what Antifa is trying to emphasize for the most part. Um, do they do things or engage in tactics that I am opposed to? Some would, but here's the thing about Antifa. Antifa is not an organization; it's a movement. Kind of like, if you want to, kind of like you want to compare it to the Tea Party. There is no organization called the Tea Party. It was a movement. Just as there is no organization called Antifa. It's a movement. It's a movement of various schools of leftists working together to put a stop to violent racial oppression in this country. Um, and I don't see what is wrong with physically putting a stop to racially inspired violence. Now, we can have a debate about whether horrific, racist, right wing organizations have a right to exist or not. I would contend on a from my civil libertarian perspective, which means that a very very pro free speech perspective, that that the idea of shutting down ideologies that you disagree with um, is not healthy in a democratic society. So yes, I am opposed to censorship and even censorship of political ideologies that I oppose most. And so that means that if the KKK or the neo Nazis or whatever other uh, racist alt right retards wants to go around um, and marching on a street, and they pay their little fees, and they get their permission from various local city councils, and they dot their I's and cross their T's, and they're not committing any violence, and they just want to go and have a march and some speeches and be obnoxious and say obnoxious things, as long as they're not harming anybody, you know, so be it. But the moment they harm somebody, uh, I'm for the law cracking down on them when they inflict harm. The Southern Poverty Law Center, which is an organization that I value, uh, had a clever way of dealing with groups like the Aryan Nations or some of the various Klan organizations throughout the country. Because the Southern Poverty Law Center do support freedom of speech, but they go about it this way: when a racist white nationalist group commits murder, instead of legally shutting it down, they do it through civil actions. And by civil action is taking it to the courts and financially destroying these organizations. You know, if and they've done that. They've done it with a Klan group in Alabama that killed a young African American in the 1980s, and with a civil suit, and the property, which was worth several $1 million, was awarded to the black family of the kid that was killed, and that Klan group got shut out of business. And I believe there was a murder in the late 90s by Aryan Nations, and again a lawsuit. Southern Poverty Law Center did a lawsuit, and the Aryan Nations was financially shut down. And here's the thing: if the Aryan Nation or the Ku Klux Klan didn't want to be shut down, it's very easy. Don't go around murdering people. So yeah, it was great to shut. It was great shutting down the Aryan Nations because they shouldn't go around murdering people. The Klan shouldn't go around murdering people. But if you're in such a group and you're sitting there and you're not harming anybody, then yeah, I would say that, uh, free speech has to be protected, and that will get me in trouble with some sections of the left. But that's okay. Um, the idea of shutting down or declaring Antifa domestic terrorist organization is inconsistent because there is really no. I never hear. I never hear people on the right, whether they're racist or even not racist at all, talk about banning the Klan or banning the neo Nazis, but they kind of want to do it to the Antifa group. Senator Ted Cruz and Senator Bill Cassidy is introducing legislation to declare Antifa a terrorist organization. And considering that it's Bill Cassidy and Ted Cruz, considering that they're wrong 95% of the time on the issues, I am opposed to declaring Antifa a domestic terrorist organization, and it's quite inconsistent because Antifa has never murdered anyone. I want you to hear this: Antifa never murdered anybody. Last year, according to the Anti-Defamation League (ADL), there's been 50 murders caused by white nationalists. But compare and contrast: zero by Antifa, being guilty of nothing more than being kind of unpleasant in public, versus white nationalist organizations that's murdered 50 some people. Okay, um, doing the math there, and according to that math, I have to call it bullshit, and it's a slippery slope when you want to go and use legislation to designate groups that you may be opposed to as domestic terrorist organization. It could lead to silencing of other groups. And again, I'm a free speech radical. I support radical free speech, and I always have to tell my fellow leftists that you got to support freedom of speech for our own fucking survival, for our own self-preservation. Because when free speech is shut down by the government, even if it's free speech, even if it's the freedom of speech of groups you abhor, you're doing it at your own peril and risk when you cheerlead that government, because that same government can turn around and go after you. And that's exactly what's going around right now with Donald Trump wanting to declare Antifa a terrorist organization. While he pretty much says There are good people on both sides at the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville. How many people did Antifa kill in Charlottesville? Zero, zero. How many people were killed in at Charlottesville? Do the math by the alt right itself. The lady that was murdered with the car running over, and I think there was some. I think there was some law enforcement people that that accidentally died. I think there was like a helicopter crash. So I'm not. That's really not a blame to anybody other than what happened with law enforcement. Just an accident. But getting back to what I was saying here, there are repercussions. There are just repercussions all around for declaring an organization that can be at the worst mildly unpleasant at times. Yeah, do I think that Richard Spencer should have been sucker punched beside the face at Trump's inauguration? I don't agree with Richard Spencer, but no, no, giving him a shiner when he's not done anything other than just sounding like a jackass in an interview. No, he shouldn't be sucker punched. Not at all. Um, but if you're being attacked, you got a right to defend yourselves and everything. And as I said, I mean, and what about the Proud Boys? The Gavin McInnes group, Proud Boys, doing their shit. Now they're not explicitly racist, but they're certainly, if they're not alt right, they are what is called alt light. And or if you want to compare them to a sliding scale of what kind of fascism exists, with Hitler's National Socialism being like the the shittiest of that ideology, and then you could take it to this notch here with, I don't know, maybe Mussolini, who was not as racialized or racist, or the racial component was not emphasized. I'm not going to say racially indifferent, but or this level with Antonio Salazar of Portugal, who basically declare every country Portugal colonized around the world as part of a greater Portugal, and it seemed to have been kind of a, a, a mixture between the indigenous populations of Portugal and of Portugal itself that the government seemed to not really be too bothered about. That I don't want to call it liberal, but the probably the most benign of the movement. Regardless, um, we should just don't. We should be careful about this sort of thing. And the Proud Boys may be in the not with this tier where it's Hitler, but maybe some of the other tiers where it's race neutral or racism is not as emphasized. There's kind of a spectrum, I guess you could say, that it runs across, just as there's a spectrum on the left and there's a spectrum of all ideologies. I'm rambling, but the point I'm trying to make is I am on the side of free speech, and I supports Antifa's right to exist. And if by any situation occurring whereby Antifa is declared a terrorist organization, as far as I'm concerned, I think that all of the left should sit there and take a principled stand and say we're all Antifa now, because I do not believe in silencing dissent at all. I'm Bernie Bro. If you like what I have to say, or if you hate what I have to say, feel free to comment. Please press the like button And if you could, subscribe and tell everybody about this channel and subscribe. I'm Bernie Bro. And until next time, because I got to go to bed. Until next time, I will talk to you all later. Peace.